Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today. I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story asterisk. The glass doors of Sterling and Associates reflected Holofera. Bennett's nervous expression as she smoothed down her modest navy blazer. The law firm occupied the top 15 floors of the Ashford Tower, a gleaming monument to wealth and power in downtown Chicago. She clutched her worn leather portfolio tighter, reminding herself why she was here. Her mother, Caroline, needed those medical treatments, and this temporary legal assistant position paid 3 times what she made at her previous job. The reception area screamed luxury. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath her feet, and a waterfall feature trickled somewhere in the background, creating an atmosphere of calculated calm. The receptionist, a woman with severely pulled-back hair and ice-blue eyes, barely glanced up from her computer screen. Holofera Bennett. "I'm here for my first day," she announced. Trying to keep her voice steady, the receptionist's gaze swept over her with obvious judgment, taking in the off-rack blazer and sensible shoes. 15th floor. Ask for Patricia Morgan. She'll orient you. The elevator ride felt eternal. Holofera watched the numbers climb, each floor representing another layer of wealth she didn't belong to. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a world of glass walls, designer furniture, and people who looked like they'd walked out of fashion magazines. Patricia Morgan turned out to be a kind woman in her 50s, with warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Welcome, dear. I know this place can be intimidating, but you'll find your footing." She led Holofera through a maze of corridors, pointing out conference rooms and offices. "That's the break room, though hardly anyone uses it. Most people eat at their desks. These are the associate offices, and down this hall are the partners." They stopped in front of a massive corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Through the glass walls, Holofera could see a man standing with his back to them, phone pressed to his ear. He was tall, with broad shoulders beneath an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was styled perfectly, and even from behind, he radiated authority. That's Richard Ashford. He owns the firm and about a dozen other companies. Brilliant lawyer, tough as nails, and unfortunately quite difficult to work for. Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Between you and me, he's been through a lot. Makes him harsh sometimes, especially with young women. Just keep your head down and do good work." Before Holofera could respond, Richard turned around. His face was striking, all sharp angles and intense dark eyes that seemed to see through everything. Those eyes landed on Holofera. His expression immediately hardened into something cold and dismissive. He ended his call and stepped out of his office. "This is the new temporary assistant?" His voice was deep, with an edge that made Holofera's spine straighten defensively. "Yes, Mr. Ashford. This is Holofera Bennett. She comes highly recommended and has excellent qualifications," Tricia said. Her tone professional but warm. Richard's eyes traveled from Holofera's face down to her shoes and back up again. The assessment was quick, clinical, and utterly humiliating. "Another one. Tell me, Miss Bennett, what exactly are you hoping to gain from this position, besides a paycheck?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm sorry? It's a simple question. Young, attractive women don't typically pursue temporary positions at law firms unless they're looking for something more permanent. A wealthy husband, perhaps? A generous benefactor?" His tone was casual, but the accusation was clear. Heat flooded Holofera's cheeks. She'd expected professional challenges, difficult work, maybe even some condescension about her state university degree. But this blatant accusation of being a gold digger within minutes of meeting her boss was something else entirely. "I'm here to work, Mr. Ashford, to do my job well and earn my salary honestly. Nothing more, nothing less." She kept her voice level, refusing to show how much his words stung. Richard's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Of course you are. Patricia, get her settled. I want the Morrison files organized and summarized by end of day. All 37 boxes of them." He turned back to his office without waiting for a response. Patricia winced. "That's impossible to finish in one day. Those files represent 3 years of litigation. Then she'd better get started, hadn't she?" Richard called over his shoulder before his door closed with a decisive click. Holofera stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. Patricia touched her arm gently. "Don't take it personally, dear. He does this to everyone. tests them, pushes them, waits for them to quit or prove themselves. Has anyone ever completed one of his impossible tasks? Patricia smiled sadly. But they usually burn out within months. The question is whether you're willing to try. Holofera thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, the medical bills stacking up like impossible mountains. She thought of the eviction notice they'd received last month. The way Caroline tried to hide how much pain she was in to avoid worrying her daughter. "Show me where the files are." The Morrison case boxes filled an entire conference room. Holofera rolled up her sleeves and dove in, creating organizational systems, cross-referencing documents, building timelines. She skipped lunch, ignored her aching back, and kept working even when her vision started to blur from staring at legal jargon for hours. Around 7 in the evening, when most of the office had emptied, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find a man in his late 30s, watching her with an unsettling smile. He was handsome in a polished way, with sandy blonde hair and expensive cologne that arrived before he did. "Still here?" "That's dedication." He extended his hand. "James Warren, senior partner." Holofera shook his hand, noticing how he held it a fraction too long. "Holofera Bennett. Just trying to finish what Mr. Ashford assigned." Ah, yes, Richard's famous impossible tasks. He does love to break in the new assistants. "You know, if you need any help navigating things around here, I'm always available. Maybe we could discuss it over dinner sometime?" The offer was friendly enough, but something in his eyes made her uncomfortable. "That's kind of you, but I think I should focus on work for now." His smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his expression. "Of course. Just remember, it helps to have allies in this place. Richard can be quite ruthless." After he left, Holofera returned to the files with renewed determination. She wasn't going to give Richard Ashford or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing her fail. By midnight, she'd organized all 37 boxes, created a detailed summary document, compiled a timeline of events that made the case progression. Crystal clear, she was printing the final pages when she heard a door open down the hall. Footsteps approached, and then Richard appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. He looked surprised to see her still there. "You're still here." "It wasn't a question. I finished." Holofera handed him the bound summary. Trying not to show how exhausted she was, Richard took the document, his fingers brushing hers briefly. He flipped through it, his expression unreadable. She watched his eyes scan her work, looking for any sign of approval or criticism. The silence stretched on, broken only by the rustle of pages. Finally, he set the document down. "This is thorough. More than I expected. It wasn't exactly praise, but coming from him, it felt like a victory." "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." He studied her for a long moment, and Holofera had the unsettling feeling he was reassessing his initial judgment. "Why are you really here, Miss Bennett? And don't give me that line about honest work. Everyone has an angle." "At." The exhaustion made her honest. "My mother has stage 3 cancer. The treatments aren't covered by insurance, and we're drowning in medical debt. I need this job because without it, I lose her. So yes, Mr. Ashford, I'm here for the money. But I'm earning it honestly, which is more than you seem to believe anyone is capable of."
Ow!
Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor of cynicism. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening. "Get some rest. Be here at 8 tomorrow." He walked away, leaving Holofera alone in the conference room. Wondering what secrets lurked behind Richard Ashford's walls of ice, she gathered her things and headed home. Unaware that in his office, Richard stood at the window, her words echoing in his mind. For the first time in years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about someone. The thought terrified him more than any courtroom battle ever had. The next morning arrived too quickly, bringing with it new challenges and the beginning of something neither Holofera nor Richard could have predicted. The weeks that followed established a strange rhythm between Holofera and Richard. He remained demanding and cold, assigning her tasks that would crush most assistants. But she noticed subtle changes. He no longer made cutting remarks about her motives. His impossible deadlines became merely difficult ones. And sometimes, late at night when they were the only ones left in the office, she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. The breakthrough came with the Westmore case. A corporate merger worth $300 million. The opposing counsel was known for playing dirty, and Richard needed someone he could trust to handle sensitive documents. To everyone's surprise, he chose Holofera. This case could make or break the firm's reputation, Richard said during their first strategy meeting. His office felt smaller with just the two of them, the city lights twinkling below like fallen stars. I need absolute discretion and integrity. Can you handle that? Yes, Mr. Ashford. Holofera met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated.
Hi, Richard.
When we're working cases together, call me Richard.
Oh.
It was a small concession, but it felt monumental. Over the next few weeks, they spent countless hours together, building arguments, reviewing contracts, anticipating the opposition's moves. Holofera discovered that beneath Richard's cold exterior was a brilliant legal mind, and occasionally flashes of dry humor that made her smile despite herself. One evening, as they reviewed depositions, Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire body tensed. I need to take this. He stepped out onto his private terrace, and through the glass, Holofera could see his agitated gestures. The way he ran his hand through his hair in frustration. When he returned, his carefully constructed mask had slipped slightly. He poured himself a bourbon without offering explanation. Everything okay? Holofera asked softly. My ex-fiancée Diana is getting married. To the man she left me for? Actually, he took a long drink. She sent me an invitation. Can you imagine the audacity? Holofera set down her pen. How long ago did you break up? 3 years. We were together for 4 years before that. I thought she loved me for who I was, but it turned out she loved my bank account and the doors it opened. His voice was bitter. I came home early from a business trip and found her in our bed with Marcus Thornton, a hedge fund manager worth twice what I am. She didn't even apologize. Jess said she'd been bored and Marcus offered more excitement. I'm sorry that happened to you. Richard laughed harshly. Don't be. It taught me a valuable lesson about trust and human nature. Everyone has a price, Miss Bennett. Everyone wants something. That's not true, Holofera countered gently. Some people actually value integrity over profit. Like you. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Before she could respond, her own phone rang. It was the hospital. She answered with trembling hands, listened, and felt the blood drain from her face. I'll be right there. She stood abruptly, gathering her things. I'm sorry. I have to go. My mother's had a complication. I'll drive you. Richard was already grabbing his coat. You don't have to do that. I know. His tone brooked. No. Argument. The drive to the hospital was tense and silent. Richard's luxury sedan felt absurdly out of place in the modest neighborhood where Caroline was being treated. He walked with Holofera into the hospital, his presence commanding attention even in scrubs and worried families. Caroline looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, her skin pale against the white sheets. But her eyes lit up when she saw her daughter. Holofera, baby, I'm fine. They're just being cautious, Mom. You collapsed. Holofera took her mother's hand. Fighting tears? I'm tougher than I look. Caroline's gaze shifted to Richard, curiosity replacing concern. And who is this handsome man? My boss, Richard Ashford. He gave me a ride. Caroline studied him with the piercing insight only mothers possess. The one who's been working my daughter to the bone? She comes home exhausted every night, but she never complains. Says the job is important. Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. Your daughter is the best assistant I've ever had. Her work ethic is unmatched. Work ethic, Caroline smiled knowingly. That's one way to describe her. But what I want to know is if you appreciate her for more than just her ability to work long hours. Mom, Holofera warned, mortified. But Richard was looking at Caroline with newfound respect. I'm beginning to, Mrs. Bennett. I'm beginning to. A doctor arrived to discuss Caroline's treatment, and Richard quietly excused himself. Holofera found him 20 minutes later in the waiting room, on the phone with someone, his voice low and urgent. He ended the call when he saw her. Your mother seems strong, he said. But the treatments are bankrupting us. Holofera hadn't meant to say it, but exhaustion made her honest. The experimental treatment that might actually cure her costs $200,000. We'll never afford it. Something flickered in Richard's eyes, but he only nodded. Let's get you home. You need rest. The next few days blurred together. Holofera threw herself into the Westmore case, using work to avoid thinking about her mother's deteriorating condition. Then, 3 days before the trial, everything exploded. James Warren cornered her in the copy room, his friendly mask finally slipping. "You know, Holofera, I've been very patient with you. Most women would jump at the chance to be with a senior partner. I'm not interested, James. Please respect that." His smile turned ugly. "That's unfortunate. Because I've noticed some irregularities in the Westmore files. Missing documents, altered timestamps. If I didn't know better, I'd think someone was leaking information to the other side." Holofera's blood ran cold. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. And unless you want me to take these concerns to Richard and the ethics board, I suggest you reconsider my dinner invitation." She stared at him, understanding dawning. "You're the one altering files. You're setting me up. Prove it." He stepped closer, his cologne suffocating. "Your word against mine? Who do you think they'll believe? The senior partner, who's been here 10 years, or the temporary assistant from the wrong side of town?" Before Holofera could respond, the door opened. Richard stood there, his expression thunderous. "Step away from her, James. Now." James's confident expression faltered. "Richard, I was just discussing some case concerns. I heard every word. I've had my suspicions about you for weeks, so I had monitor your computer activity. Did you really think you could embezzle from my firm and frame an innocent woman to cover your tracks?" Richard's voice was deadly calm. "Security is on their way up. I suggest you call your lawyer. You're going to need one." James's face went from red to white. "You can't prove anything. I've 6 months of evidence. Altered files, fake invoices, shell companies. You've stolen over $2 million, James. And when you realized the Westmore case review would expose your accounting irregularities, you tried to frame Holofera." Richard stepped between them, his body language protective. "It's over." Security arrived minutes later, escorting a protesting James from the building. The office erupted in whispers and shocked faces. Richard led Holofera back to his office and closed the door. "Are you okay?" His hands were gentle on her shoulders. "You knew. You've been investigating him?" Holofera felt her legs go weak, and Richard guided her to a chair. "I suspected when certain files kept going missing, but I didn't know he was harassing you. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you already thought I was a gold digger looking for an angle. If I complained about a senior partner, you would have assumed I was causing drama or trying to manipulate my way up." The words came out more bitter than she intended. Richard flinched. "You're right, and I'm sorry. I've been so consumed by my past betrayals that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." He knelt beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. "You are nothing like Diana or any of the others. You're genuine, hardworking, and you have more integrity in your little finger than most people have in their entire bodies." Holofera whispered, "'Cause I've been fighting something for weeks now, and I'm tired of fighting." His hand cupped her cheek. "I'm falling for you, Holofera. It terrifies me, and I've been terrible to you because of my own fear, but I can't deny it anymore." Her heart hammered. "Richard, I can't be someone's redemption arc. I can't fix your trust issues or heal your past wounds. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be better, that I am better because of you." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but please give me a chance." Holofera wanted to say yes more than anything. But fear held her back, memories of Trevor's abandonment, of being deemed not good enough because her bank account didn't match her heart. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Richard stood, and the loss of his warmth felt like a physical ache. That night, Holofera sat with her mother, telling her everything. Carolyn listened quietly, then took her daughter's hand. "Baby, I know you're scared. Trevor hurt you badly. But this Richard, he's fighting demons too. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is give someone a second chance, especially when they're genuinely trying to change. What if he hurts me? What if he doesn't? What if you miss out on something beautiful because you're too afraid to try?" Caroline squeezed her hand. "Life is too short for regrets. Trust me, I know." The next morning, Holofera arrived at work to find the entire office buzzing. Richard had called an emergency meeting. She slipped into the conference room, confused. As Richard stood at the head of the table, I owe someone an apology, he began, his eyes finding Halafara's. When Halafara Bennett started here, I judged her unfairly. I let my past experiences cloud my judgment. And I treated an exceptional employee with cruelty and suspicion she didn't deserve. His voice carried through the room. She has proven herself time and again to be the most dedicated, honest, and talented assistant this firm has ever seen. Effective immediately, Halafara is promoted to junior associate with full benefits and partnership track. The room erupted in applause. Halafara sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. When the meeting ended, Richard approached her. "Can we talk, please?" She followed him to his office, her heart in her throat. He closed the door and turned to face her. "I meant every word. You deserve that promotion. But more than that, you deserve someone who sees your worth, who appreciates everything you are." He pulled an envelope from his desk. "This is for your mother. It's a check for $200,000. Halafara's hand shook as she opened it. "Richard, I can't accept this. It's not charity. Consider it a signing bonus for your new position, or a loan if that makes you more comfortable. But your mother deserves a chance at that treatment, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice your future for her health." He took her hands. "I care about you, Halafara. Let me help." She looked at this complex, wounded man who was trying so hard to break through his own barriers. "On one condition, you'll let me in too. No more walls, no more pushing me away when things get scary." "Deal." He pulled her close. And when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. The following months transformed both their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. Caroline began the experimental treatment, and her response was remarkable. The cancer markers dropped steadily, and color returned to her cheeks. She teased Richard mercilessly every time he visited, which became increasingly frequent. "When are you going to make an honest woman of my daughter?" Caroline asked one Sunday afternoon as they shared lunch in her hospital room. Richard glanced at Halafara, who was pretending not to listen while arranging flowers. "I'm working on building trust first, Mrs. Bennett. Rushing things didn't work out well for me in the past. Call me Caroline. And honey, at my age, you'll learn that life is too precious to waste time," she winked. "But I appreciate you taking care of my girl." At the office, their relationship was an open secret, but Richard maintained professionalism. He was harder on Halafara than any other associate, pushing her to excel, and she rose to every challenge. She won her first case 3 months into her promotion, a complicated contract dispute that even seasoned lawyers had deemed unwinnable. Richard took her to dinner to celebrate at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the city. "You were brilliant in that courtroom. The way you dismantled their argument about breach of fiduciary duty was masterful." Halafara blushed, still unused to his praise. "I had a good teacher, even if he was insufferable for the first few weeks." "Insufferable?" Richard raised an eyebrow, amused. "I prefer to think of it as motivational. You called me a gold digger, my greatest mistake." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I've been thinking about that day a lot lately. About how close I came to destroying something precious because I was too broken to recognize it." "You weren't broken. You were hurt. There's a difference." Halafara squeezed his fingers. "We all build walls to protect ourselves. The question is whether we're brave enough to tear them down." Richard's expression grew serious. "I need to tell you something. The night at the hospital, when I stepped out to make a call, I wasn't just arranging the treatment payment. I hired a private investigator to track down Diana." Halafara's stomach tightened. "Why?" "Because I needed to face my past properly. I met with her last week." He saw Halafara's alarm and quickly continued, "Not like that. I needed to understand what happened, to get closure. And you know what I realized?" "What?" "I was never actually in love with her. I was in love with the idea of her, with what I thought we had. But it was all surface, built on shallow foundations." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "With you, it's different. It's real. You challenge me, frustrate me, make me want to be better. You saw through my defenses to the person underneath, and somehow you decided I was worth the effort." Tears pricked Halafara's eyes. "You are worth it. You always were." The following week brought unexpected news. James Warren's trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all counts. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. As they left the courthouse, Richard pulled Halafara aside. "I keep thinking about how close I came to believing him. If I hadn't been monitoring his activity, if I hadn't started seeing you for who you really are, I might have let him destroy your reputation." His voice was thick with emotion. "You could have lost everything because of my prejudice. But you didn't let that happen. You chose to see the truth." Holofera touched his face. "That's what matters." Richard leaned into her touch. "Move in with me." "What?" "I know it's fast, but I'm tired of spending nights apart. I want to wake up next to you. I want to share meals and argue about case strategy over breakfast. I want all of it." He searched her face anxiously. "Is that crazy?" Holofera thought about the tiny apartment she still shared with her mother, who was now healthy enough to return to work part-time. She thought about Richard's penthouse, with its stunning views and empty rooms that echoed with loneliness. "It's not crazy. But let's do this right. Let me talk to my mom first." Caroline's response was characteristically direct. "Of course you should move in with him. That man is head over heels for you, and you light up like a Christmas tree whenever he's mentioned. Go build your life, baby." "I'll be fine. Are you sure?" "I don't want you to feel abandoned," Caroline laughed. "Abandoned? Honey, you've put your life on hold for 2 years taking care of me. Now I'm in remission, I've got a clean bill of health, and my daughter has a chance at happiness with a good man. That's all I've ever wanted." She pulled Holofera close. "Besides, that fancy apartment of his probably has a guest room. I expect regular invitations." Always, Holofera promised. Moving day was chaotic and beautiful. Richard insisted on hiring professional movers, but Holofera wanted to pack her own things, to sort through memories and decide what deserved space in her new life. She found an old photo of her and Trevor, taken during happier times, and felt nothing but gratitude. That heartbreak had led her here, to this complicated. A wonderful man who was currently arguing with a mover about the proper way to carry her grandmother's lamp. "It's fine," she called out. "It's an antique. It needs to be handled carefully." Patricia, who had volunteered to help despite it being a Saturday, whispered to Holofera, "He's been like this all morning. Nervous as a cat. You'd think he was moving into your place instead of the other way around." Indeed, Richard seemed unusually anxious. He kept checking his watch, making phone calls, disappearing for mysterious stretches. When the last box was finally unpacked, he grabbed Holofera's hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her to the rooftop terrace, which she'd only glimpsed briefly during her previous visits. But now, it was transformed. String lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of stars. A small table was set for 2, with candles flickering in the evening breeze. And standing beside the table, grinning widely, was Carolyn. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited." Caroline's eyes were suspiciously shiny. "Now hush, and let the man do what he's been planning for weeks." Holofera turned to Richard, who suddenly looked terrified. He took both her hands, his normally steady voice shaking slightly. "6 months ago, you walked into my office, and I made the worst first impression possible. I judged you, insulted you, treated you with cruelty you never deserved. I was so convinced that everyone had ulterior motives that I couldn't see the genuine person standing right in front of me. Richard, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Please, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "You didn't just prove me wrong. You transformed me. You showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that trust is a choice we make despite fear, not because of its absence. You looked past my wealth and my defenses and saw a person worth caring about. You made me want to be that person." He released one of her hands to pull a small velvet box from his pocket. Holofera's breath caught. "I know it hasn't been long. I know we're still learning each other. But I also know, with absolute certainty, that I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you every single day that you made the right choice in giving me a chance." Richard dropped to one knee, and the Chicago skyline sparkled behind him like a blessing. "Holofera Bennett, will you marry me? Will you let me spend forever earning the trust you've given me? Will you build a life with me? One where we're partners in everything, equals in every way that matters?" Tears streamed down Holofera's face as she looked at this man who had started as her harshest critic and become her greatest champion. Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes. The ring slid onto her finger, a simple, elegant design that caught the light. Richard stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her as Caroline applauded and the city hummed below them. "I love you, Richard whispered against her lips. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was afraid of the words. I'm not afraid anymore. I love you too. Even when you were insufferable, especially when I was insufferable, he corrected with a grin. The wedding took place 6 months later, in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Carolyn walked Holofera down the aisle, both of them healthy and beaming. Patricia served as maid of honor, dabbing at her eyes throughout the ceremony. Richard's vows made everyone cry, especially when he promised to never let fear make him cruel again. To always see Holofera for the exceptional woman she was, and to spend every day as grateful that she'd looked past his worst qualities to find his best. Holofera's vows were equally moving. She promised to challenge him, to never let him hide behind walls, to build a partnership based on equality and respect. You saw me as a gold digger, she said, her voice strong and clear. But the only treasure I was ever after was the heart you kept locked away. Thank you for trusting me with it. The reception was intimate, filled with people who genuinely cared about them. Even some of Holofera's old colleagues from before Sterling and Associates attended, marveling at her transformation. But she knew she hadn't transformed at all. She'd simply been given the opportunity to show who she'd always been, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. Richard pulled her close. What are you thinking about? About first impressions. About how wrong they can be. She smiled up at him. About how grateful I am that you gave us a second chance to get it right. Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. What was the first? Hiring you in the first place, even if I was terrible about it. His expression turned serious. I almost lost you because of my prejudice, Holofera. That haunts me. Don't let it. We both had wounds to heal, walls to break down. What matters is that we did the work. She touched his face tenderly. And we'll keep doing it together. For the rest of our lives, later that night, in the honeymoon suite. As they lay tangled together watching the city lights, Richard traced lazy patterns on Holofera's shoulder. I have a confession. Oh. Remember when your mother got sick and needed that expensive treatment? How could I forget? You paid for it. Did more than that. I donated money to establish a fund at that hospital for patients who can't afford experimental treatments. It's called the Caroline Bennett Hope Fund. He felt her stiffen with surprise. I did it anonymously, but I wanted you to know. Your mother's courage, your dedication to her, it opened my eyes to how many families struggle with impossible choices. Holofera couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed. Richard, that's extraordinary. It's the least I could do. Your mother gave me you. She raised an incredible woman, and when I think about how close I came to never knowing you because of my own bitterness, it makes me want to help others who are fighting battles nobody should have to fight alone. I love you so much, it terrifies me. Sometimes, good, I'd hate to be the only one. Who's terrified? He kissed her softly, but we're in this together now. Whatever comes, we face it as partners. 5 years later, Holofera stood in her office at Sterling and Associates. Now a named partner, reviewing briefs for an upcoming trial, the firm had grown under her and Richard's joint leadership, developing a reputation not just for excellence, but for integrity. They'd implemented mentorship programs, established pro bono requirements, and created a culture where people were valued for their work rather than judged by their backgrounds. Richard appeared in her doorway, loosening his tie. Ready to head home? Carolyn is making dinner and she threatened me if we're late again. Holofera smiled. Her mother had moved into the guest house on their property last year, claiming she wanted her independence but loved being close to family, especially now that family was about to expand. She stood, smoothing her dress over her rounded belly. At 6 months pregnant, she glowed with contentment. Richard's hand immediately went to her stomach, his face softening in wonder as their daughter kicked. She's active today, he murmured. Takes after her father. Stubborn and demanding. Holofera leaned into him. I was thinking about names. What about Diana? To honor your past, show that we've truly moved beyond it. Richard was quiet for a moment, then shook his head gently. No, the past deserves acknowledgement, but our daughter deserves her own identity, free from old wounds. He touched Holofera's face. What about Hope? Hope Bennett Ashford. Because that's what you gave me when I'd forgotten what it felt like. Tears filled Holofera's eyes. Hope, it's perfect. As they drove home through the Chicago streets, Holofera reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them here. She'd walked into Sterling and Associates expecting just a job, a way to save her mother. Instead, she'd found a partner who challenged her, respected her, loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. Richard had transformed from a bitter, wounded man into someone capable of profound love and generosity. He'd learned to trust again, to see people as individuals rather than potential threats. And together, they'd built something beautiful. A relationship founded on mutual respect, hard-won trust, and the courage to be vulnerable. "What are you thinking about?" Richard asked, glancing at her at a red light. "About first days and last chances. About cruel words that turned into promises." She smiled at him. "About how sometimes the best things in life start with the worst first impressions. Sounds like material for your memoir." "Maybe I'd call it The Price of Pride," she laughed. "Or maybe How to Fall in Love with Your Harshest Critic. I prefer second chances and new beginnings." Richard brought her hand to his lips. "Because that's what you gave me, Holofera. A chance to begin again, to be better, to build something real." They pulled into their driveway as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Caroline waved from the front porch and their dog barked excitedly. It was ordinary and perfect. A life neither of them could have imagined that day when Richard had looked at Holofera and seen only what he feared. Not what she offered, but love had a way of opening eyes that fear had closed. Trust had a way of healing wounds that betrayal had carved. And second chances, when embraced with courage and honesty, had a way of becoming the greatest gifts of all, as they walked hand in hand toward home, toward family, toward the future they'd built together. Both Holofera and Richard knew they'd found something rare and precious. Not a fairy tale romance, but something better. A real love. Earned through struggle and patience, strengthened by respect and trust, and worth every difficult moment it took to build. The price of pride had been high, but the reward of humility was priceless. And in the end, that made all the difference. Thank you for taking Fed time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.